Welcome back to Velsheen Rule. Facebook was slapped with a record fine, charged $5 billion by the Federal Trade Commission over the company's privacy policy. So let's take a look at $5 billion. It's a lot of money to just about everyone, except Facebook. For Facebook, it's less than 1% of their $537 billion market cap. In fact, the punch of that fine was wiped out by a $6 billion gain in their stock yesterday. Central to the most recent criticism of Facebook privacy practices is the Cambridge Analytica scandal and its role in shaping the 2016 election. The company was a central player in the influence campaign targeting persuadable voters to lean towards President Trump. The president's 2016 campaign spent a total of $5.9 million for the company's services. Cambridge Analytica employees were even embedded with the campaign's digital team, along with Facebook and Google employees. Now, a chilling Netflix documentary called The Great Hack is digging into Cambridge, Facebook, and data collection at large, and all the parts they played in the influence campaign during the presidential election.
Crooked Hillary, and the zeros, the OO of crooked were a pair of handcuffs, and it was all about
like prisoner.
She belongs behind bars.
And you have created this.
Defeat Crooked Hillary. And then we made creative, hundreds of different kinds of creative, and we put it online. We just put information into the bloodstream of the internet, and then watch it grow. And so this stuff infiltrates the online community and expands, but with no branding. So it's unattributable, untrackable.
And my view is that if you can't run your own house, you certainly can't run the White House. Can't do it.
Crooked Hillary, right? Crooked. She's crooked as you can be.
Yes, that's right. Lock her up.
Let's defeat her in November.
Joining me now, the director of The Great Hack, Dijan Najaim, and the film's producer, Kareem Amar. Thank you both for being here. This documentary is chilling. Help us understand what this interference and these influence campaigns are like. When there's a clear attack, everyone can see it, right? If I shoot you in broad daylight, everyone sees it. But as I watch this documentary, it more feels like we're slowly being poisoned to death.
I've in my career always wanted to make films about zeitgeist topics, and
you got one.
This felt like the zeitgeist topic now. In 2004, I made a film called Control Room, which was dissemination of information and how it affects your reality. So whether you were watching Al Jazeera, I was embedded in Al Jazeera and Central Command, where you had Fox, MSNBC, and all the other channels, and depending on what you were watching, your whole understanding of the Iraq War was completely different. And this felt like Control Room on steroids, where two people in the same household, depending on what their news feed was saying, they could have a completely personalized version of reality. And seeing that affect our elections was something that was very powerful and something that we wanted to make a film about. Having said that, it's not a partisan film.
No, I think that.
But it also shouldn't be a partisan issue.
It's not a partisan issue at all.
Issue. I mean,
but there's a partisan response.
Of course there is, unfortunately, but that's a reflection of the polarized times we're living in. I think one of the things that we've uncovered in the making of this film is that the polarization of the American public may be a part of the Facebook business model. And I think that's something that we have to ask Facebook to account to, which is, where do these societal losses that happen from everyone living in their own reality and being encouraged by amoral algorithms to push them further and further into their own confirmation bias, where do these societal losses accrue? Whose balance sheet do they show up on? Because right now, what we've found is that the core functionability of the democratic society in the United States is broken.
But what does that look like? To say we have to ask Facebook to take a closer look and be held accountable, unless lawmakers are planning to do that, Facebook may have this massive problem, but their revenues aren't down. You saw they got hit with a $5 billion fine, and the market says, great, now that's out of the way, and the stock goes up. So let's be actually honest. Is there a way to hold Facebook accountable?
Well, we are complicit as the users, right? And we need to figure out.
We're not deleting accounts.
And also that's also a bit of a false choice, right?
What do you mean?
It's like either if you delete your account, you're basically saying that my choice is either I'm connected with my friends and lose all my privacy, or I'm not connected, right? So in a way, Facebook's turned into, or they should see themselves as a public service company because so many people are on them. Right?
They want to be seen as that, but you can't be a public service if you're a for-profit business.
That's exactly. They're not operating as a public service.
And they have no way of being held accountable. I think the problem is we have to start to realize that, you know, when you look at the Mueller testimony and what's been happening over the last couple of days, there's been a lot of conversation about, you know, the Russian meddling in the elections, and there's also been some chatter about Cambridge Analytica and their role in the election. And I think what you realize, what both of those two issues have in common is that they both use the vulnerabilities they found in the American public via Facebook to take advantage of people, exploit people's data, and run psychological experiments without consent. So Facebook is now a crime scene, and we have to look at it that way, and we have to be dealing with Facebook's crime scenes in a way that allow for the rule of law to protect the democratic process.
And there is a portion of the population that would say that's how sore losers look at it. In the film, you have Steve Bannon saying, if you want the world to progress and get to the next level, you must break it. And these divisions that we're talking about are the cracks that are creating this break. Nigel Farage is a central figure in this movie and in Cambridge Analytica. And look at Brexit. It makes the U.S. government look like a dream.
Right. Well, exactly. And I think you said something which is about consent. And we as a population have not consented to that. I mean, when we go onto Facebook, we are complicit, but we have to figure out as a population what's for sale. If we've become the commodity, we have to figure out, if we're the commodity, what part of ourselves are we willing to sell? Should any of it be for sale?
We seem to be okay with that because we're not feeling money flow out of our pockets. Right. It's an existential issue.
Because it's been invisible for so long. And part of what we're seeing with the Mueller testimonies, with all of the conversations you guys are having with the Fourth Estate, is the attempt to make the invisible visible. And that's what we sought out to do with this film, is to try to take this world of data and create a visual language for it. The problem has been is that similar to when we were feeling anxiety around the planet and the environmental movement was coming to be born, they didn't have words like global warming. And it took images, it took films like Inconvenient Truth, it took pictures of oil wreckage sites to show the destruction of marine life that could then travel around the world and inspire people to get behind these issues. We have hoped that when creating this film, we can begin to create a visual language to get people to realize what's happening to their data.
I want to talk about what I found to be the most disturbing thing. Cambridge Analytica may be dismantled, but according to your team, President Trump's 2020 team already has former Cambridge Analytica team members now working for them. Yes. They don't need the Cambridge Analytica infrastructure. They need those brains, and they need those data scientists. And if those data scientists are now scattered around the world, isn't that more dangerous? Or as dangerous?
It's as dangerous, and it's only going to increase. And again, it's not only technology that's going to be used on the Trump side, but it's also going to be used on both sides of the aisle. So again, we need to figure out how should this technology be used, and should our data and our personal data be even used in elections?
And how do we hold Silicon Valley accountable? Because I think Silicon Valley has been quiet during these times. And we're not saying that anyone in Silicon Valley wakes up and says, how am I going to wreck democracy today? I don't believe Mark Zuckerberg wakes up and says, how am I going to destroy the democratic process?
No, but when you've created a monster and that monster is your baby,
exactly.
What do you do with your baby?
And let's look at history. You know, I mean, no oil execs used to wake up and say, how are we going to pollute the planet? But pollution was happening. So just like we've seen spillover effects in all other industries, we are now seeing the spillover effects of technology on our society.
But yes, No oil execs woke up and said that. But I don't see any of those oil execs now funding an inconvenient truth and being crusaders on the other side. Mark Zuckerberg and others may be silent and they can go off and lead their extraordinary lives, but never be held accountable unless the consumer and the government asks them to. You really think Mark Zuckerberg is then going to be a crusader?
Who has more power, Mark Zuckerberg or the U.S. Congress? Who has more power, Mark Zuckerberg or the British Parliament?
And you think he's going to relinquish it?
I don't think he is. I think, though, what's going to happen is we've entered into a moment where there's a shift in awareness, where people are starting to realize, wait, move fast and break things, combined with growth at all costs, leads to a combustible situation, which is what's happened. So this ethos of just believe in innovation and it will protect us, well, that's not true. And we now have to create an accountability movement, and it starts with awareness, and then it starts with all of us starting to hold these technologists more accountable and demand that our user agreements, those things that we sign every day without ever, reading.
A lot of words.
Right?
Thank you both. This film is chilling. It's important. The Great Hack on Netflix. I highly recommend it. All right, moving forward, I want to talk to NYU professor, a friend of mine, the former CEO of the marketing firm L2, Scott Galloway. Scott, welcome. First, in the documentary we just discussed, Cambridge Analytica lists in the company L2 as a company they've worked with or involved in their data sources. Just help me understand what that's all about.
Yeah, I found out about that this morning. I assume it's no different than if they'd listed Wikipedia as a source for information. But other than that, I don't know anything. I know that we had no professional relationship with them, so I assume they were just listing us as a reference.
Amazing. Let's talk about Facebook and this FTC fine for a moment. The initial headlines, biggest fine ever for something like this. Fine schmine. To me, when I read it, it was like when Elon Musk got fined by the SEC and he blew his nose with those $100 and then mailed them in.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think the FTC has become an unwitting co-conspirator as opposed to a countervailing force to private power. And that is, and you pointed this out earlier in your segment, when your stock price goes up by more than the amount of the fine, the algebra of deterrence here is totally backward. And that is, if you and I decided to rob a bank and we figured out that there was a 99% chance we'd get caught and we might make away with $100,000, that means we're, for the upside of $1,000, we're risking going to prison, so we decide not to rob a bank. If an organization like Facebook or any big tech platform can sacrifice potentially 4 weeks of income or 10 weeks of cash flow in exchange for not putting in place the safeguards to get in the way of their unfettered supernova business model, then the decision, the shareholder-driven decision every day is to continue to break the law. It's as if we haven't learned anything. This not only wasn't a deterrent, this has sent a strong signal to all of big tech to continue to ignore the law.
The uncertainty of what the government is going to do is now out of the picture. They got the fine, they know what the rules are, and they're charging ahead. But Facebook, in terms of user data, it's a drop in the bucket compared to Google. So do you feel any sense of confidence that the government is going to take action, especially as it looks at these giants?
Yeah, so for the first time, Stephanie, I do believe that the breakup of big tech has begun. I think that antitrust action is now...
But hold on, antitrust review, tell me where the action is.
Well, hopefully it'll lead to action, but to be clear, it's going to take years. But this seems to be, at least it appears to be, one of the few bipartisan issues where you have people on the left and the right both thinking that breaking them up, or at least contemplating breaking them up, is a good thing. And my prediction is that these companies are going to probably do it prophylactically. I think Jeff Bezos is probably going to spin AWS, and on the spin it'll be one of the 10 most valuable companies in the world. So I do think the breakup of big tech has begun. And back to the fine, Stephanie, this fine was almost perfect. It was just missing one thing. It was missing a zero. If they had fined them $50 billion, which, by the way, Facebook could have paid, they would have $40 billion on their balance sheet. They would have issued $10 billion in debt. The stock probably would have gone from 200 to 80. Mark Zuckerberg's wealth would have gone from 60 billion to 20 billion. Today, every big tech company would be in a meeting saying, okay, this just got real. We need to make serious changes. So this FTC fine was perfect, except for one thing. They missed a zero.
Can we just remind our audience of that? If you're wondering how powerful Facebook is, if they had been fined $50 billion, they could have handled it. That's amazing. Scott, I want to share, with regard to the FTC fine, Facebook did give us a quote, and I want to share it. Facebook has agreed to pay a $5 billion penalty, which is one of the largest in history. But even more important, Facebook will make some major changes to how it builds products and operates as a company. We also reached out to the major tech companies on data privacy, and a Facebook spokesperson told us this, quote, "This documentary captured in a snapshot in time. Since this episode, we have made a fundamental shift in the way we approach our work. Transparency and accountability are driving two concepts, and privacy is built into everything we do. When we find problems, we fix them, and we make sure the public knows." We do have to point out there was an enormous time lag between when Facebook knew of what happened with Cambridge Analytica and when the American people did. Twitter declined to comment on the documentary or their data sharing or sales practices. Amazon told us this: "We do not sell our customers' data, and we don't share a customer's personal information with third parties for marketing purposes without the customer's consent. Our privacy notice describes the limited examples of when we may need to share customers' personal information with third parties. We sometimes hire third parties to perform services on our behalf, and we share our customers' information only as necessary for them to perform those services. For example, a delivery service needs a customer's name and address to deliver a package, but they may not use a customer's personal information for marketing or any other purpose." We also reached out to Google, which is working on a statement.
Hey, MSNBC fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down there and click on any of the videos here to watch the latest interviews and highlights. You can get more MSNBC for free every day with our newsletters. Just visit msnbc.com/newsletters to sign up now.